Hello everyone! Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the show with PJ Thum. It's a new season for us and a new era for Singapore. Welcome to our new Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong. Welcome, good sir. There's a lot of skepticism about Wong. One common criticism of Lawrence Wong is that he comes from a long line of generic Chinese men who are either perm-secs or military generals who joined the PAP and got parachuted into office via an unfree and unfair electoral system. These haters say that PAP leaders are so generic that the toilets at PAP headquarters don't need mirrors. The PAP leaders just look at each other. But no, I want to say that we here at the show of PJ Thum believe Lawrence Wong when he says he'll be different. This is a man who worked his way up from the ranks. Started from the bottom, now we're here. Wong brings diversity to the PAP leadership. I mean, just look at him. Sure, he's a straight cisgender married Chinese man who served in the civil service and has a master's degree from Harvard, but he went to Victoria Junior College. VJC, not Raffles. To the PAP, that's the equivalent of being a radical communist drag queen Jehovah's Witness from Uranus. Haters continue to insist that Lawrence Wong is just a placeholder and he will be a puppet of Lee Hsien Loong. That's ridiculous. Yes, I know that Lawrence Wong is Lee Hsien Loong's former principal private secretary, that he owes his entire career to Lee Hsien Loong, that Lee is also still senior minister and Wong is surrounded by cabinet ministers who are Lee loyalists like Teo Chee Hean and K. Shanmugam, and other members of the cabinet like Chan Chun Sing and Ong Ye Kung think they should be PM and think that they can do a better job as Prime Minister and don't mind seeing Lawrence Wong fail. And Wong has no political base apart from Lee Hsien Loong and is thus entirely reliant on Lee Hsien Loong's patronage. And Lee also remains Secretary General of the PAP with all the power over the party that entails. And Lee Hsien Loong is also Chairman of GIC with all the power and patronage that entails. And the civil service is full of people who owe their careers to Lee Hsien Loong. And Lee appointees are also in other key positions like Lucien Wong, Lee's former personal lawyer who's Attorney General, and also the Chief of Police and the Commissioner of Police are Lee appointees. And Ho Ching, his wife, is also still chair of Temasek Trust. And the Lee family in general is incredibly wealthy and powerful, and Wong's family isn't, and I forgot what my point was. To comment, here is Lawrence Wong himself to address all his haters.
Hello, Singapore. Have you heard me play the guitar?
Thanks for coming on the show, Mr. Prime Minister. How do you respond to critics who say that you are just a puppet of Lee Hsien Loong?
PJ, I absolutely guarantee you that I will be my own man. I am Prime Minister. I believe when push comes to shove and the time comes to take hard decisions, I would do so, as long as the decision is in the interest of Singapore and Singaporeans.
So why is Lee Hsien Loong still Secretary General of the PAP and still in the cabinet?
We value the more experienced ministers and we invite them to continue contributing in different ways, in their own ways. And that may include giving advice, giving orders, or telling me what to do. It does not mean I have to do what they tell me to do.
But isn't that a hand stuck in your backside?
Just because there is a hand where it is does not mean I am not my own man. What the hand is doing is merely offering suggestions. I can make my own decisions.
Oh, I see. So if I pickle.
PJ, it was my own choice to laugh. The hand merely suggested that I laugh. I chose to laugh. You see the difference? I am in charge.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Mr. Prime Minister. I wish you all the best. Good luck. High five!
Ow! My face! I meant to do that. It was my choice.
It's the show with PJ Thum. We're back, baby.
Oh.
Hello and welcome to the show with PJ Thum. It's our first show in a while, so let's start with something light, something easy, casual. Oh, what? Okay, there's nothing much I can add about Gaza. The genocide is a tragedy. People are dying. I don't think I need to go into all the literal centuries of conflict in Palestine. I'd only add that it is sadly very common for former oppressed peoples to become oppressors themselves. America went from fighting the British to dispossessing the Native Americans. India went from fighting the British to oppressing its minorities, especially Muslims. South Africa went from fighting the British to apartheid. Indonesia went from fighting the Dutch to a massacre of suspected communists in 1965 to oppressing the Papuan people today. In Malaysia, many innocent Chinese were herded into concentration camps during the Malayan emergency. Singapore, of course, is the product of the displacement of Malays from their traditional lands by the British, but that was then carried on by the PAP government. Malays being thrown out of their ancestral lands in Kallang at Kampong Supu was a major cause of the 1964 riots. In the late 1990s, the PAP government literally evicted the descendants of the Sultan from the Istana Kampong Glam, using the police to throw out 170 Malays off their ancestral land so they could turn the Istana into a museum. Oppression is like that story of the man who gets yelled at by his boss, so he goes home and slaps his wife, so she beats her son who kicks the dog. If the dog then bites the kid, who do we blame? The dog? The kid? Everyone in that chain is both a victim and an oppressor, except the boss, who represents capitalism. Capitalism. Want to justify exploiting people to make lots of money? Use capitalism. History's greatest justification for underpaying and abusing your employees. Start exploiting labor today. The answer is that nothing justifies the violence in either direction. But some people use their victimhood to justify acting in an oppressive way. Or some people look at someone else's victimhood to excuse their oppression. History shows us that being a victim and being an oppressor are not exclusive. It's very common that former victims become oppressors, if only to prevent themselves becoming victims again. After all, one way to get rid of people whom you feel threatened by is to kill all of them. That doesn't make you any less of a victim, but it does make you an oppressor. So all I'll say about the ongoing conflict, the ongoing genocide in Gaza is this. First, that it is entirely possible, and indeed often the case, for people to be both victims and perpetrators of oppression. Second, that people often believe their victimhood justifies their perpetration of oppression. And third, that in any given situation, the people with more power to change a situation usually have more responsibility for it. And this applies to all sides of this very complicated conflict. But speaking of being able to change a situation, what I do think is interesting about the genocide in Gaza is what it has shown us about Singapore and about the ability of the Singapore people to change government opinion on something really important. In Singapore, we often feel powerless because the PAP government is so powerful and there's very little we can do or say to change its opinion. But Gaza has shown us that when we stick together, we can create change. We are unstoppable. Okay, not as unstoppable as Swifties or BTS Army. Let's not get carried away. There's only 3.5 million of us, but still pretty powerful. Powerful enough to change hardline positions of the Singapore government. And that's our main story today. The power of collective action. A story of hope. Throughout Singapore's recent history, Singaporeans acting together have created change. Famously, of course, it was a mass movement of Singaporeans that forced out the British and shaped our decolonization. If you want to know more about our decolonization, buy my book. But more recently, Singaporeans have created concrete change. For example, when the MRT was first built, it was not accessible to wheelchair users. The wheelchairs couldn't fit through the gantries. It was only after disabled advocates spoke out and lobbied for wheelchair-accessible gantries that the authorities started to keep physical accessibility in mind when developing public transport. Or the women's rights charity AWARE was formed to fight the Graduate Mother Scheme, which was based on Lee Kuan Yew's crazy eugenicist idea that women with university degrees had better genes, and therefore should be given incentives to have more children, so we would have more children with better genes. Yes, that really happened. And it was a bunch of women who got together to put a stop to that nonsense. More recently, of course, we have the repeal of Section 377A of the Penal Code, the introduction of mandatory rest days for migrant domestic workers, and the 2024 Workplace Fairness Act, which prohibits some discriminatory employment practices, all of which were from decades of campaigning by Singaporeans. So what's that got to do with Gaza? Well, let's take a stroll back in time, all the way to the innocent days of the 6th of October 2023. It was a different, more peaceful time then. Tharman had just been elected president, promising to stand up to the government and do whatever Lee Hsien Loong tells him to do. Singapore at the time was, and still is, a staunch ally of Israel. After Singapore's separation from Malaysia, Singapore decided to model the Singapore Armed Forces, including our conscription system, after the Israeli Defense Force. From 1966, Israeli military advisors helped set up and train the Singaporean military and supplied us with tanks and missiles. So, when the conflict in Gaza erupted on the 7th of October, the PAP government naturally took the side of Israel and strongly condemned the rocket attacks. A special parliamentary session was convened on the 6th of November 2023 when then DPM and now PM Lawrence Wong explained Singapore's position, which included support for a two-state solution and warning against an excessive Israeli response.
In other words, no matter how gruesome the acts of terrorism committed by Hamas, they cannot justify a disproportionate response by Israel that imposes collective punishment on the Palestinians in Gaza.
Now, Wong also emphasized Singapore's neutrality.
We want to be friends with all. We do not want to import foreign quarrels or politics here. We do not want to choose sides.
Okay, first of all, that isn't true at all. I mean, we totally take sides in international conflicts. We supported the US in the Vietnam War. We supported the US in the Cold War. We supported the US in both Iraq wars. We propped up the Khmer Rouge and their genocide. We smuggled arms to Myanmar's military government. Remember all of that? So what Wong is saying is we will stand up to the USA and do whatever they tell us to do. We take sides and import foreign quarrels and we meddle in foreign countries all the time. We are literally allies with Israel but do not recognize Palestine. How is that not taking sides? Now, I'm not saying it is not okay to take sides. I'm just saying we're taking sides. But okay, never mind that. What Wong was alluding to are the PAP's oft-stated grid lines. No foreigners involved in Singapore politics and conversely no Singaporeans involved in foreign politics. No foreign funding in Singapore and conversely no Singapore funding for foreign politics. It is okay for the PAP government to meddle and make statements and spend our taxpayer dollars however they want, but not ordinary Singaporeans. Oh no. Minister for Law and Home Affairs K. Shanmugam, seen here watching a puppy with a broken leg as it slowly struggles to cross the PIE at rush hour, said in the FICA debate.
And I think it is not acceptable for us to allow such foreign interference and allow such manipulation of Singaporeans. Eventually, it will weaken our society.
I've noted the hypocrisy of this before, of course, that the PAP government is totally okay with foreigners commenting on Singapore as long as they support the PAP position, and with Singaporeans commenting on foreign politics all the time as long as they support the PAP position. But as the excessive action by Israel in Gaza became clear, as Singaporeans began to realize that we were watching a genocide unfold in real time, public anger grew. And it is a genocide, no matter what some people say. In fact, let's confirm this by asking one of the leading experts in Southeast Asia on state-sponsored political violence. Honey, Is what's happening in Gaza considered genocide?
Yes, it meets the definition of genocide under the Rome Statute, the Genocide Convention, as well as theories of mass violence.
Thanks, honey. Love you. So you see, Professor Sol Iglesias of the University of the Philippines Diliman concurs. So, with the ongoing genocide, Singaporeans naturally also wanted to have their say on Israel's actions in Gaza, and many people applied to hold protests at Hong Lim Park. Within the first month, there were at least 5 applications for protests on the Gaza conflict. After all, why should the government get to have an opinion and we can't? The government works for us. So, why can the government criticize Hamas and caution the Israeli government, but we can't? But every time someone applied to hold an anti-Gaza genocide protest, the government said no. For our non-Singaporean friends, I have to explain that it's illegal to hold a political event in Singapore without a permit, that you can only apply to hold protests at one place in Singapore, Hong Lim Park, and that the definition of a public assembly in Singapore is one person. Yes, one person is a public assembly. Remember Lawrence Wong, arrested for taking a photo with a piece of paper? He served 15 days in jail. So, you know, the PAP government loves to say that Singaporeans don't do politics, to which I say, have you ever seen a Singaporean parent trying to get their kid into a good school? Or meddling in their kids' sports teams? Or Singaporeans on condo management committees, especially the en bloc committee? These are the most devious, Machiavellian, kiasu people on earth. Listen, never get between a Singaporean parent and their children's education. Don't do it. You will die. So Singaporeans were told to shut up about Gaza, but Singaporeans refused to shut up. Singaporeans started campaigning online. Singaporeans who were abroad started protesting. The PAP government, of course, did not like this and started trying to intimidate Singaporeans into silence. Some Singaporeans who protested abroad were temporarily detained for questioning on their return to Singapore. In fact, Kamira Asrori framed the letter she received from the police summoning her for interrogation. Slay, girl! And the sheer anger in the Singaporean public and our refusal to shut up led to something miraculous. By the end of 2023, the PAP government changed its position. It's a Christmas miracle. For example, on 9th of January, Minister for Law and Home Affairs K. Shanmugam, seen here watching the scene in The Lion King where Mufasa dies tragically, unexpectedly said that a Palestinian film festival at the projector could go ahead. He said, films that will be shown at the upcoming Palestine Film Festival do not promote violence or enmity against any group. But remember, that's not the red line he said before. Before it was no foreign politics. Now it's foreign politics are okay because it does not promote violence or enmity. That's a major concession. Compare the same circumstances in 2018, the last time there was a Palestinian film festival. Back then, the IMDA banned one of the films scheduled to be screened because it explored the conflict in Palestine from the perspective of 2 young children without counterbalance. Keep in mind, they didn't say it was inaccurate. They banned it because it was inflammatory. In other words, they didn't want people getting angry from learning the truth. It's kind of like how the PAP suppresses histories of Singapore told from other points of view. Imagine how stupid you got to be to keep trying to tell alternate, accurate histories of Singapore knowing that the government will keep harassing you forever to shut you up. Anyway, if you want the Israeli point of view, where on earth would you go? I mean, if only there was a regular and long-running film festival putting forward the Israeli point of view that's sponsored by the Israeli embassy and runs in Singapore's biggest cinemas every year since 1993, that even ran continuously through COVID, which, as far as we can find, the Singapore government has never banned any films of. So anyway, 2018 was the last Palestinian film festival until 2024, which leads me to my second point. The Palestinian Film Festival returned in 2024 explicitly in response to the events in Gaza and was a fundraiser for Palestine. And here's the second red line: Singaporeans openly donating to foreign political causes. Now, before you say that they were donating to a humanitarian crisis, that it's not political, remember that the PAP government had already explicitly defined the Gaza genocide as a political issue, not a humanitarian one. You can't have it both ways. Either it's a political issue or it's not. In fact, the government has actively praised people for donating, and not just to officially endorsed charities like the Red Cross and Red Crescent, but also other non-governmental charities like Love Aid SG, which is led by prominent government critic Gilbert Goh, and other non-Singaporean charities. But we didn't stop there. A group of Singaporeans organized a letter-writing petition. Over 300 Singaporeans signed up for a solidarity event called Show Up for Palestine in just 4 days. The original venue, the projector, was forced to withdraw from holding the event by the police, which declared that the event would require a permit, which they would not be willing to issue. For our non-Singaporean friends, I have to explain that the Public Order Act also makes it illegal to hold a political event in Singapore indoors without a permit if it is deemed to pertain to a bunch of issues. For this one, the police said it was because it dealt with race and religion. The organizers had already gotten legal advice that the event did not deal with race and religion. It was about support for a humanitarian crisis, but the police disagreed. So again, what is the Gaza genocide? If it is a sensitive political issue touching on race and religion, why is it okay for Singaporeans to donate money to influence the events there? If it is a humanitarian issue, why is it not okay for Singaporeans to get together to support the people dying there in a solidarity event? So the event was eventually held at a private venue at Ubi Tech Park, which, let me tell you, is really ulu. For most Singaporeans, Ubi Tech Park might as well be in Batam. But look at how many people showed up. 160 people at the event, along with 70 people submitting letters to then PM Lee Hsien Loong, calling on him to reconsider Singapore's relationship with Israel. Naturally, the governments are investigating the event too. Or as the Straits Times wrote, the police are probing the event. Have you ever noticed that the police love to probe Singaporeans? I guess they can do this now that 377A has been repealed. I mean, they probe scammers, they probe crypto fugitives, they probe Grab drivers, they probe alleged thieves, they do mass probing of hundreds of people, and they probe young people who are fiddling with themselves or something like that. What was I talking about? Oh yes, protests against Gaza. There have been events at various university campuses, protests against the Israeli presence at the Singapore Air Show, and protests against Singapore's arms trade with Israel, which inevitably the police are probing. Events then took a weird turn in late February when the Ministry of Education sent slides to teachers to teach about the Israel-Hamas conflict, as the government terms it. The slides were heavily criticized for being factually inaccurate, one-sided, and intellectually dishonest. The PAP government then went into damage control mode and have since modified the slides, although I understand they are still using them. Now, I won't get into the details of the slides, but again, I want to point out that we can create change. Even when a government is pushing a narrative to our children that is really misleading, our protests can create change, and very rapidly. Remember what I said about not getting between a Singaporean and their child's education? You see what I mean? Not even the PAP can stop angry parents. Minister for Education Chan Chun Sing was forced to back down and apologize for this in the face of all these protests. And instead, the PAP government now accepts that some dialogue about Gaza is inevitable and is trying to control that dialogue. The government has been forced to hold events about Gaza, including one called Gaza Monologues, featuring REACH, the government feedback unit, and other parties. But the pushback by Singaporeans continues. Ang Swee Chai is a hero. Co-founder of Medical Aid for Palestine, awarded the Star of Palestine for her work as a surgeon saving lives in Palestine, a member of the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame. But in Singapore, the PAP has always treated her as an enemy for her activism. She was detained without trial in 1977 as part of a wider crackdown and fled to London with her husband Francis Khoo, where she has lived ever since. In 2020, she was stripped of her Singapore citizenship. But to everyone's surprise, earlier this year she was given an award by the Harvard Club of Singapore. She was not only allowed into Singapore, she was invited to speak at NUS and widely feted. And not only did the PAP government say nothing, but she was profiled in the Straits Times. Give her back her citizenship, PAP government. And before you say, oh, we don't allow dual citizenship, the only reason she has British citizenship in the first place is because you exiled her and then stripped her of her citizenship. We also had a well-publicized visit by our foreign minister to Israel, where Vivian told Netanyahu that he's, quote, gone too far. And most recently, we actually voted in favor of full Palestinian membership of the UN. Our former permanent ambassador to the UN, Tommy Koh, noted that Singapore had previously abstained on similar draft resolutions, so this was a significant shift. My point is this. We often despair that there is nothing we can do to change the government's minds, but our recent history shows that we can create change. If we stand together on an issue, the government will shift. If you look at the last 13 years since the 2011 elections, the government has made a lot of changes in response to the loss of Aljunied GRC, including about housing, education, healthcare, the economy, all the most important issues. In just a few months, Singaporeans got the government to back off on two of their most deeply held red lines: no foreign politics and no foreign funding. So remember, if anyone says no foreign politics, no foreign funding, that Singaporeans don't take part in politics, that the government doesn't listen to Singaporeans, remind them of Gaza and how Singaporeans stood together in solidarity with the people of Gaza and forced our government into a position of change, both internationally and domestically. Now, as we were filming this episode, news broke that 3 women were being charged with organizing an illegal protest around that whole letter-writing campaign to Lee Hsien Loong. This is an escalation because usually activists are given at least one warning before being charged, but 2 of those women have not been given warnings before. At the same time, Vivian has conceded in Parliament that Singapore would be willing to recognize Palestinian statehood given certain conditions. This is another major concession. And both of those things tell you the same thing. The protests are working. The PAP government is being forced to change its positions, and that's why they are trying to intimidate us into shutting up. So believe, Singapore, we can change together. Okay, that's our show for this week. See you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Hello everyone. Grouchy the Malayan Sun Bear here with a big thank you to all our members who've supported us so loyally all these years. The work we do takes up so much time and money, and we're a very small team working tirelessly across Southeast Asia, and we're so grateful for your support. New Narrative is a movement to democratize democracy in Southeast Asia, and it's supported by its members, people like you. So we need your help to keep fighting. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please do join New Narrative as a member or donate to New Narrative. If you become a member, you gain access to our website with all our wonderful articles and videos and comics and podcasts. And you can also interact with other like-minded people who are fighting for a better Southeast Asia, including all our team members, and have wonderful conversations about important issues in a constructive way. So, please consider becoming a member. It's as low as $5 a month, or donate to New Narrative at newnarrative.com/donate. Please like and subscribe to this video, and please share. Thank you very much.